The morning rain had stopped, but the puddles on Meridian Avenue still reflected the grey Seattle sky as Sophia Chen sat beside the weathered upright piano that had somehow found its way to the covered bus station. Her fingers traced the chipped keys without pressing them, feeling the familiar grooves worn smooth by countless hands. The instrument looked as abandoned as she felt, its dark wood scarred and faded, but Sophia knew better than anyone that appearances could be deceiving. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sophia had been 17 when the world collapsed around her. Now at 19, she measured time not in months or seasons, but in the rhythm of survival. Each day began the same way: wake up in whatever doorway or shelter had offered refuge the night before, find somewhere to wash her face, and make her way to this corner, where the Metro Transit Authority had inexplicably installed a public piano as part of some forgotten arts initiative. The piano had appeared 3 months ago, bolted to the concrete and protected by a simple overhang. A small plaque read, "Play me," in cheerful blue letters, though most commuters hurried past without a second glance. For Sophia, it had become both sanctuary and lifeline. She kept her cardboard sign propped against the bench: "Music for kindness, anything helps." The words were carefully written in block letters, though she'd noticed most people read them with the same expression they might give to graffiti. This particular Tuesday morning brought the usual stream of commuters. Software engineers clutched their coffee cups like shields against human contact. University students shuffled past with earbuds creating their own private soundtracks. Office workers checked their phones compulsively, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of urgency and importance. None of them seemed to see Sophia, though she sat less than 10 feet from the bus stop where they waited. She had learned to read the city's rhythms. The 7:30 a.m. crowd moved with military precision, too focused on reaching their destinations to spare attention for street musicians. The 9 a.m. wave was slightly more relaxed, occasionally dropping coins into her small canvas bag. Lunch hour brought tourists and shoppers who sometimes paused to listen, especially if she played something they recognized. Evening commuters were tired, eager to get home, but occasionally one would surprise her with unexpected generosity. Sophia's own story felt like something from another lifetime. She had grown up in a modest house in Ballard, the daughter of 2 music teachers who had filled their home with melodies and harmonies. Her mother, Lynn, taught elementary school music and had given Sophia her first piano lessons at age 4. Her father, David, was a high school band director who could play nearly every instrument he taught. Music hadn't been a choice in the Chen household. It had been as natural and necessary as breathing. By age 7, Sophia was playing pieces that challenged students twice her age. By 10, she was performing with the Seattle Youth Symphony. At 13, she had won the state piano competition for her age group. Her parents had talked about Juilliard, about conservatories, about a future where their daughter's extraordinary gift would open doors to a world of possibilities. The car accident happened on a rainy November evening when Sophia was 17. Her parents had been driving home from her solo recital at Benaroya Hall, where she had performed Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the youth orchestra. The reviews had been glowing. Her father had been talking about recording demos, about summer programs, about the scholarship applications they would file in the spring. A drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of Aurora and 85th. David and Lin Chen died on impact. Sophia, who had stayed behind to help pack up instruments, got the call from the hospital 30 minutes later. In that single phone call, her entire universe shifted. The house, it turned out, carried a mortgage larger than her parents' life insurance. Extended family, lived across the country, and lacked the resources to take in a grieving teenager. The state placed her with a foster family in Tacoma, who saw her piano playing as an impractical hobby rather than a calling. The Hendersons were not cruel people, but they were practical ones. They ran a household budget that left no room for piano lessons or competition fees. When Sophia explained about the state competition she had qualified for, Mrs. Henderson shook her head with what she probably thought was kindness. "Honey, you need to focus on real skills now. Piano is nice, but it won't pay the bills." Sophia tried to explain that music wasn't just her hobby, it was her identity. She attempted to describe the feeling of sitting at a piano, of hearing the way notes could build into something larger than their individual sounds, of the way music had always been her language for expressing emotions too complex for words. But the Hendersons looked at her with the same polite incomprehension they might show to someone speaking in a foreign language. The foster home had no piano. The high school she attended had budget cuts that eliminated most music programs. Sophia found herself surrounded by the constant noise of teenage life, but unable to access the one thing that had always made sense to her. She practiced fingering exercises on a paper keyboard she drew herself, trying to maintain muscle memory for pieces she could no longer hear except in her mind. At 18, she aged out of the foster system with nowhere to go and no resources beyond a high school diploma and a gift that no one seemed to value. She had tried to find work, but applications asked for addresses she didn't have and references from a life that no longer existed. Shelters had waiting lists and time limits. Social services had programs with requirements she couldn't meet. The first time Sophia slept outside, she cried until exhaustion took over. The second night was easier, though not by much. By the third week, she had learned which doorways offered the best protection from rain, and which security guards would move her along versus which ones would pretend not to see her. By the second month, she had discovered the network of resources that kept Seattle's invisible population alive: food banks, public restrooms, libraries where she could spend hours staying warm. When the piano appeared at the bus station, Sophia had approached it with the same mixture of longing and terror she might feel approaching a former lover. Her fingers found the keys automatically, and she had played a simple melody she remembered from childhood. The sound that emerged was imperfect. The instrument was clearly not well maintained, several keys stuck, and the tuning was questionable. But it was still music, and for the first time in months, Sophia felt like herself again. Now, 3 months later, she had established a routine. She would arrive at the piano around 8 a.m., after the heaviest commuter rush, but before the business day settled into its rhythm. She would sit beside the instrument for a few minutes, watching the faces of people who passed by, trying to gauge their moods and their openness to unexpected beauty. Some days she played classical pieces from memory, Bach inventions that sounded elegant even on the battered upright, Chopin nocturnes that could make busy commuters slow their pace despite themselves. Other days she played popular songs she had picked up from listening to street musicians, melodies that might catch the attention of someone who wouldn't normally stop for Beethoven. The money was inconsistent but essential. On good days she might collect $30 or $40. On bad days she was lucky to earn enough for a cheap meal. She had learned to save every dollar she could, knowing that weather or police or simple bad luck could disrupt her income stream at any time. More important than the money, though, was the music itself. Each time she sat at the piano, Sophia felt connected to something larger than her immediate circumstances. The keys beneath her fingers were a direct line to memories of her parents, to years of training and discipline, to a sense of identity that homelessness could not erase. She had also learned to read the subtle signs of her audience's reactions. The businessman who slowed his pace when she played jazz standards. The elderly woman who smiled whenever Sophia performed hymns she remembered from childhood. The teenagers who recorded her playing on their phones, though whether out of appreciation or mockery, she could never be sure. This particular Tuesday started like any other. Sophia had spent the night in a women's shelter downtown, grateful for the bed, but exhausted from the constant noise and tension that filled such places. She had washed her face and hands in the shelter's bathroom, brushed her teeth, and tried to make herself presentable despite clothes that had seen too many wears between washings. Her breakfast had been a day-old pastry from a coffee shop that donated unsold items to the shelter. Not enough to fill her stomach, but enough to quiet the hunger that had become her constant companion. She had learned to function on less food than she would have thought possible, though the weakness that came with chronic malnutrition was something she tried to hide from the social workers and police officers who occasionally checked on the street community. The walk to the bus station took 20 minutes from the shelter. Sophia used the time to mentally rehearse the pieces she might play, depending on her mood and her assessment of the morning crowd. Classical music seemed to work best with the early commuters. Something about Bach or Mozart appeared to fit their image of respectable public art. Later in the day, she could take more risks with contemporary pieces or improvisations. As she approached the piano, Sophia noticed it had been tagged with new graffiti overnight. Someone had spray-painted a crude design across the music stand, and several of the keys bore sticky residue from stickers that had been placed and removed. The sight made her heart sink. The piano was far from perfect, but it was her piano in all the ways that mattered. Seeing it vandalized felt personal. She spent several minutes cleaning the keys with a tissue and some water from her bottle. The graffiti would require more serious intervention, but she could at least make the instrument playable. As she worked, a few early commuters paused to watch her ministrations. One man, dressed in an expensive suit, shook his head with apparent disapproval. "Waste of taxpayer money," he muttered to his companion. "Look what happens when you put nice things in public spaces." Sophia pretended not to hear, though the comment stung. She had become adept at making herself invisible when necessary, at avoiding eye contact that might invite unwanted conversations or confrontations. But comments like that reminded her how tenuous her relationship with this small piece of public space really was. After cleaning the piano as best she could, Sophia arranged her sign and placed her canvas bag where passing pedestrians could see it. She had learned the optimal positioning through trial and error, visible enough to indicate her purpose, but not so prominent as to appear aggressive or demanding. The art of street performance, she had discovered, involved constant calculation of social dynamics she had never had to consider when performing in concert halls. She began with a piece by Debussy, something impressionistic and gentle that wouldn't startle early morning commuters, but might catch the attention of anyone with musical training. Her fingers moved across the keys with muscle memory that 2 years of interrupted practice couldn't erase. The sound that emerged was far from perfect. The piano's limitations were obvious to anyone with trained ears, but the music was recognizably beautiful. A woman waiting for the bus turned at the sound of the first notes. She was perhaps 40, dressed in scrubs that suggested she worked in healthcare. Her face showed the exhaustion of someone finishing a night shift, but when she heard Sophia playing, her expression softened. She approached the piano and dropped a $5 bill into the canvas bag. "That's beautiful," she said quietly. "My grandmother used to play that piece." Sophia looked up and smiled, the first genuine expression she had offered the world that morning. "Thank you. Debussy always feels like morning to me." The woman nodded and returned to wait for her bus, but Sophia noticed she stayed within earshot rather than moving to a different part of the station. It was a small victory, the kind that had sustained Sophia through the worst days of the past year. As the morning progressed, a small but steady stream of people passed by the piano. Most hurried past without acknowledgement, lost in their own thoughts and schedules. A few paused to listen for a moment before continuing on their way. Occasionally someone would drop coins or bills into her bag, sometimes with a smile or nod of appreciation, more often without any interaction at all. Around 10 a.m., when the commuter rush had thinned and foot traffic became more leisurely, Sophia noticed a group of teenagers approaching. They looked to be about her age, maybe slightly younger, and something in their body language immediately put her on alert. They moved with the casual confidence of people who had never had to worry about their next meal or where they would sleep that night. The group consisted of 5 students, 3 girls and 2 boys, all carrying expensive backpacks and wearing clothes that spoke of disposable income. Sophia recognized the type from her brief time at the high school in Tacoma, kids who took their advantages for granted and treated anyone outside their social circle as entertainment rather than as fully human. "Oh my God, look," said one of the girls, pointing directly at Sophia. "There's actually someone trying to play that thing." The comment was loud enough to carry across the station plaza, clearly intended for Sophia to hear. The group arranged themselves in a semicircle in front of the piano, effectively blocking the path for other pedestrians. Sophia felt her stomach tighten with familiar dread.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She had learned to recognize this particular type of attention, the way some people looked at her as if she were performing in a zoo rather than creating art. "I wonder if she actually knows how to play," said one of the boys, his voice carrying the same theatrical volume as his friend's. "Or if she's just hitting random keys hoping people will feel sorry for her." Sophia continued playing, trying to focus on the music rather than the commentary. She had developed strategies for dealing with hostile audiences: continue performing as if nothing was happening, avoid eye contact, finish the piece and take a break until they lost interest and moved on. Engaging with hecklers rarely ended well, especially when they outnumbered her and clearly saw her as an object of amusement rather than a person deserving basic respect. "Seriously though," added another girl, "why would anyone put a piano here? It's just going to attract more homeless people. Like we need more of that." The casual cruelty of the comment hit Sophia like a physical blow. She had grown accustomed to being ignored, to being treated as invisible or irrelevant. But being discussed as if she were a public nuisance, a problem to be solved rather than a person with inherent worth, still had the power to wound her. One of the boys pulled out his phone and held it up, clearly preparing to record Sophia's performance. "This should be good," he announced. Street piano girl trying to be a real musician. Sophia's hands paused on the keys. She looked up at the teenagers for the first time, meeting their gazes directly rather than pretending they weren't there. What she saw in their faces was worse than hostility. It was amusement, the kind of entertainment people derive from watching others fail or struggle. They weren't angry at her, they were enjoying her situation. "Could you please lower your voices?" Sophia asked quietly. "Other people are trying to get to work." The request was reasonable and politely stated, but it had the effect of gasoline on a fire. The teenagers exchanged glances that clearly communicated their delight at having provoked a response. "Oh, she talks," said the first girl with mock surprise. "I thought maybe you just communicated through bad piano playing." "Yeah," added the boy with the phone still recording. "Where did you learn to play?" "YouTube University." Sophia felt heat rising in her cheeks. 2 years of survival on the streets had taught her when to fight and when to retreat, and every instinct told her this was a situation to escape. But this was her space, her piano, her small corner of dignity in a world that offered her very little. The thought of being driven away by a group of privileged teenagers who saw her suffering as entertainment sparked something deeper than anger. Instead of responding to their taunts, Sophia placed her hands back on the keys. But this time, instead of the gentle impressionistic pieces she had been playing, she began something different. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the air. The same piece she had performed the night her parents died, the same music that had once represented everything she hoped to become. The transformation was immediate and unmistakable. Where before Sophia had been playing pleasant background music suitable for a bus station, now she was performing with the technical precision and emotional depth of a trained concert pianist. Her fingers moved across the keys with speed and accuracy that spoke of years of serious study. The melody soared above the urban noise, complex and powerful and undeniably masterful. The teenagers' conversation died abruptly.
The boy holding the phone lowered it slightly, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion. Other commuters who had been hurrying past began to slow down, drawn by music that was clearly several levels above what anyone expected to hear in a public transit station. Sophia continued playing, her eyes closed now, lost in the music that had once defined her entire sense of self. The piano's limitations became irrelevant as her technique compensated for stuck keys and poor tuning. She was no longer a homeless girl asking for spare change. She was a musician performing one of the most challenging pieces in the classical repertoire, and performing it with skill that would have been impressive in a concert hall. The small crowd that had gathered grew larger. A man in a business suit stopped mid-phone conversation to listen. A woman pushing a stroller paused and moved closer, her baby falling quiet as if mesmerized by the music. College students removed their earbuds and pulled out their phones, but this time to record something beautiful rather than to mock someone they saw as beneath them. When Sophia finished the piece, the silence that followed was profound. For several seconds no one moved or spoke. Then slowly applause began to build. It started with the healthcare worker who had been Sophia's first audience member of the day, spread to the man who had abandoned his phone call, and eventually included most of the people who had stopped to listen. The teenagers stood frozen in their semicircle, their faces cycling through emotions that ranged from shock to embarrassment to something that might have been shame. The boy who had been recording looked down at his phone as if he wasn't sure what to do with the footage he had captured. "Holy shit," whispered one of the girls, apparently forgetting that her voice could be heard by others. "She's actually really good." Sophia opened her eyes and looked directly at the group that had been mocking her just minutes earlier. Their expressions had changed completely. Where before she had seen cruel amusement, now she saw something closer to awe mixed with uncomfortable recognition of their own behavior. "Where did you learn to play like that?" asked the boy who had been recording, his voice now carrying genuine curiosity rather than mockery. Sophia considered her response carefully. Part of her wanted to tell them exactly where she had learned to play, to describe the years of training and the competitions and the future that had been stolen from her by circumstance and tragedy. Part of her wanted to make them understand that she wasn't so different from them, that the distance between their comfortable lives and her daily struggle was smaller than they imagined. Instead, she simply said, "I've been playing since I was 4. The simplicity of the answer seemed to hit them harder than any dramatic revelation might have. Here was someone their own age, clearly educated and trained, living in circumstances they couldn't imagine, and demonstrating abilities they couldn't match. "I'm sorry," said the girl who had made the first cruel comment. The apology was quiet, barely audible above the background noise of the bus station. "We didn't know you were actually talented." Sophia finished for her. "A real person, someone who might have feelings that could be hurt by your comments." The girl flushed red and looked at the ground. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, apparently realizing that their entertainment had come at the expense of someone who deserved better treatment. "Look," said the boy who had been recording, "I'm really sorry about what we said. That was messed up. Can I delete this video, or would you want me to post it? Because honestly, people should hear you play." Sophia considered the offer. Part of her recoiled at the idea of her performance being shared online, of becoming some kind of viral sensation for reasons that had more to do with her circumstances than her music. But another part of her recognized the opportunity. If people could hear her play, really hear her, maybe some of them would understand that homelessness didn't erase talent or humanity. "You can post it," she said finally. "But if you do, don't make it about me being homeless. Make it about the music." The boy nodded earnestly. "Absolutely. I'll write something about how amazing you are, not about anything else." As the teenagers prepared to leave, each of them dropped money into Sophia's canvas bag. Not coins this time, but bills, 10s and 20s that represented more income than she typically earned in several days. More importantly, they were looking at her differently now. She was no longer invisible to them, no longer an object of amusement. She had forced them to see her as a person with value and dignity. After they left, the crowd that had gathered began to disperse as well. But before leaving, several people approached to drop money in her bag and to offer words of appreciation. The man who had abandoned his phone call gave her a business card along with a $20 bill. "I work for the Seattle Symphony," he said. "If you're interested in performing opportunities, give me a call." Sophia stared at the card in amazement. The Seattle Symphony had been a dream she had given up when her parents died, a future that seemed impossible from her current circumstances. Now suddenly, that door was opening again. The healthcare worker, who had been her first audience member that morning, approached as she was preparing to leave for her bus. "I've worked night shifts for 10 years, she said to Sophia. "I've heard a lot of street musicians, but I've never heard anything like what you just played. That was conservatory-level performance." "Thank you," Sophia replied, genuinely moved by the woman's recognition of her training and skill. "I don't know your story," the woman continued, "but I know talent when I hear it. Don't let anyone convince you that you don't belong on a stage." As the morning transitioned into afternoon, Sophia found herself processing what had happened. The encounter with the teenagers had started as another humiliating reminder of how the world saw her. But somehow, it had transformed into something else entirely, a moment of recognition, of being seen for who she really was, rather than what her circumstances suggested about her. The music had done that, just as it always had. Music had been her language for communicating truths that words couldn't capture. When she played Rachmaninoff, she wasn't a homeless girl asking for charity. She was a musician sharing something beautiful with the world, someone whose gifts had value regardless of where she slept at night. For the first time in months, Sophia allowed herself to imagine a future that extended beyond simple survival. The business card in her pocket felt like a key to a door she had thought was permanently closed. The video that would soon be posted online might reach people who could offer opportunities she couldn't even imagine. But more than any of that, the morning had reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. She was still a musician. Homelessness might have changed her circumstances, but it hadn't changed her identity. The years of training, the hours of practice, the deep understanding of music that her parents had nurtured, all of that was still part of her, waiting to be recognized by a world that too often judged people by their appearance rather than their abilities. As she packed up her things and prepared to find lunch with the money she had earned, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not the desperate hope of someone wishing for survival, but the deeper hope of someone who might actually have a future worth working toward. The afternoon sun broke through Seattle's perpetual clouds as Sophia walked away from the bus station, her canvas bag heavier with coins and bills than it had been in weeks. But more important than the money was the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The world had seen her today, really seen her, and recognized that she had something valuable to offer. Tomorrow she would return to the piano. She would continue playing for commuters and tourists and anyone else who would listen.
But now she would do so with a different sense of purpose. She wasn't just playing for survival anymore. She was playing her way back to the life she was meant to have, one note at a time. The video appeared online that evening while Sophia was sitting in the Central Library, using their free internet access to search for information about the business card she carried in her pocket. Marcus Williams, Senior Talent Scout, Seattle Symphony Orchestra. She had looked up his credentials and found legitimate connections to the city's premier musical institution. The business card wasn't a cruel joke or empty gesture. It represented a real possibility. When she typed her name into the search bar out of curiosity, the first result made her stomach drop. Homeless Girls Stuns Seattle Commuters with Incredible Piano Performance had already been viewed over 50,000 times since being posted 6 hours earlier. The thumbnail showed her hands on the piano keys, her face partially visible in profile, clearly absorbed in the music.
The video itself was better than she had expected. The teenager who recorded it had kept his promise. The caption focused on her musical ability rather than her circumstances, though the word homeless still appeared in the title. More importantly, the recording quality was surprisingly good. Her performance of the Rachmaninoff came through clearly, and the camera work captured both her technique and the crowd's reaction. The comments section was a mixture of amazement and debate. This girl is incredibly talented. Someone should help her find proper training. How is someone this good playing on the streets? This is what happens when we don't fund arts education properly. She plays better than most conservatory students I know. But scattered among the supportive comments were others that made Sophia's chest tighten. Probably learned to play before becoming homeless, just playing the sympathy card now. Street performers always have sob stories. If she's really that good, why isn't she in school or working? The questions stung because they revealed how little people understood about the reality of her situation. As if talent alone could overcome systemic barriers, as if musical ability could magically produce identification documents, permanent addresses, or the financial resources needed to navigate academic institutions. Over the next few days, the video's popularity continued to grow. Local news stations picked up the story, though Sophia learned about their coverage secondhand through conversations she overheard at the library and shelter. She avoided watching the news segments, uncertain about how her story might be presented to a wider audience. The increased attention brought changes to her daily routine at the bus station, where once she might have had a small, steady audience, now she regularly drew crowds of 20 or 30 people. Some came specifically because they had seen the video online. Others were curious tourists who had heard about the piano girl from friends or social media. The larger audiences meant more income, sometimes $60 or $70 in a single morning. For someone who had been surviving on less than $20 a day, this represented unprecedented financial security. She could afford better meals, could occasionally stay in budget motels instead of shelters, could even begin to think about purchasing clean clothes that might make her appear more presentable for professional opportunities. But the attention also brought complications. Other street performers complained that she was drawing crowds away from their usual spots. Some homeless individuals approached her with requests for money, assuming that her viral fame had made her wealthy. A few people who recognized her from the video tried to take selfies with her, treating her more like a tourist attraction than a person. Most challenging were the questions from well-meaning viewers who had seen the news coverage and wanted to understand her story. They would approach during her breaks between songs, asking about her background, her family, how she had learned to play. Their curiosity was usually kind rather than malicious, but explaining her situation repeatedly to strangers felt exhausting and invasive. One particular conversation stood out. A middle-aged woman named Patricia had driven from Bellevue specifically to hear Sophia play after seeing the video shared on Facebook. She listened to several pieces, then approached during a break with obvious emotion. "My daughter is about your age," Patricia said carefully. "She's been playing piano since she was little, and she's good but not like you. When I watch you play, I keep thinking about what would happen to her if something happened to me and her father." The comment revealed something Sophia had begun to understand about her viral moment. People weren't just impressed by her musical ability, they were confronted by the fragility of the circumstances that separated their lives from hers. She represented a possibility that middle-class families preferred not to acknowledge, that talent and education couldn't always protect someone from systemic failure. "Your daughter is lucky to have parents who support her music," Sophia replied diplomatically. "Could I give you my number?" Patricia asked. "Not for anything weird, just if you ever need a meal or a place to shower, or if you want to practice on a real piano. We have a baby grand that hardly gets used." The offer was genuine and generous, but it also highlighted the awkward position Sophia now occupied in the public imagination. She had become a symbol of wasted potential, a cause that made people feel better about themselves while not necessarily changing the systemic issues that created situations like hers. Still, she accepted Patricia's contact information. Pride had become a luxury she couldn't afford, and the thought of practicing on a quality instrument was too appealing to refuse. 3 weeks after the video's initial posting, Marcus Williams finally called. Sophia had been checking the phone number on his business card daily, calling from payphones to see if he would answer. When her phone finally rang at the library, she almost didn't recognize his voice. "Miss Chen, this is Marcus Williams from the Seattle Symphony. I apologize for taking so long to reach out. I've been traveling, and when I returned I discovered that you've become something of an internet sensation." Sophia felt her heart racing. "Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure if your offer was serious." "Completely serious. I've watched the video, of course, and I've also done some research into your background. I found records of your performances with the Seattle Youth Symphony. Your former conductor, James Morrison, spoke very highly of your abilities." The mention of Mr. Morrison's name brought back a flood of memories. He had been one of the adults who had believed in her future, who had talked about orchestral careers and graduate school applications. Learning that he remembered her, that he had spoken positively about her to a professional scout, felt like validation of an identity she had begun to doubt. "I'd like to arrange an audition," Marcus continued. "Not for the symphony itself, that would require a much more formal process, but for our community outreach program. We work with talented young musicians who need additional support to develop their careers." "What would that involve?" Sophia asked, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "Educational opportunities, master classes with symphony musicians, performance opportunities with smaller ensembles. If you show the kind of promise I think you will, we can help you navigate applications for conservatory programs or university music departments." The conversation felt surreal. For 2 years Sophia had focused on daily survival, finding food, finding shelter, avoiding dangerous situations. The idea of thinking beyond the next meal or the next night's accommodation seemed almost impossible to process. They scheduled the audition for the following Thursday at the symphony's administrative offices. Marcus explained that she would need to prepare 3 pieces demonstrating different aspects of her musical training, something Baroque for technical precision, something romantic for expressive range, and something contemporary to show adaptability. After ending the call, Sophia sat in the library for over an hour, staring at the phone and trying to process what had just happened. The opportunity was everything she had dreamed about since her parents' death, but it also felt overwhelming. She had been surviving day by day for so long that planning a week ahead required a mental adjustment she wasn't sure she could make. The audition preparation became her primary focus. Patricia's offer of practice time proved invaluable. Her baby grand was a Steinway that had been maintained in perfect condition, and playing on a quality instrument reminded Sophia of capabilities she had forgotten she possessed. The response and touch of a proper piano allowed for subtleties of expression that were impossible on the battered upright at the bus station. She chose Bach's Goldberg Variations for her Baroque piece, Chopin's Ballad No. 1 for the Romantic period, and a contemporary work by Jennifer Higdon that she had learned from sheet music available online. Each piece required different technical and interpretive skills, and practicing them systematically reminded her of the structured approach to music that had defined her childhood. But the preparation also highlighted how much she had lost during her time on the streets. Her fingertip calluses had softened, affecting her ability to control dynamics and articulation. Her muscle memory for complex passages had faded in places, requiring hours of slow practice to restore. Most challenging, her confidence in performing for judgmental audiences had been eroded by 2 years of being ignored or dismissed by most people who heard her play. The night before the audition, Sophia barely slept. She had managed to shower at a community center and had borrowed clothes from Patricia that were appropriate for a professional meeting. Looking at herself in the mirror, she was startled by how normal she appeared. Clean clothes and proper grooming could disguise so much about her circumstances. The Seattle Symphony offices were located in a building downtown that Sophia had walked past countless times without ever imagining she might have reason to enter. The lobby was elegant and intimidating, filled with photographs of famous conductors and concert posters from prestigious venues around the world. Marcus Williams met her at the reception desk. He was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to assess her without judgment. His handshake was firm and professional, treating her as a colleague rather than a charity case. "Thank you for coming," he said as he led her toward the elevators. "I should mention that we'll have 2 other people sitting in on the audition. Dr. Elizabeth Harper is our education director, and Michael Santos is one of our principal pianists. They're both here to help evaluate your current level and discuss potential opportunities." The audition room contained a concert grand piano that gleamed under professional lighting. Sophia had not performed on an instrument of this caliber since her youth symphony days, and the sight of it brought back memories of concerts and competitions that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Dr. Harper and Michael Santos were waiting when they entered. Both greeted Sophia warmly, but she could see them taking note of details: her borrowed clothes, her obvious nervousness, the way she approached the piano with a mixture of longing and intimidation. "We've heard wonderful things about your playing," Dr. Harper said. "Marcus has told us about your background, and we're very interested to hear how you've continued developing your musical skills despite challenging circumstances." The phrasing was diplomatic, but Sophia appreciated the directness. These were professional musicians who understood the relationship between training and ability. They would judge her performance based on technique and interpretation, not on sympathy for her situation. She began with the Bach, choosing a variation that would immediately demonstrate her technical precision and musical understanding. The response of the concert grand was extraordinary. Every nuance of touch translated into sound with clarity and depth that made her playing sound better than she had remembered it could be. As she moved through the piece, Sophia felt her nervousness transform into focus. This was what she had been born to do, what all those years of childhood practice had prepared her for. The complex counterpoint of Bach's writing required both technical skill and intellectual understanding, and she felt her interpretation conveying both elements clearly. When she finished the Bach, the 3 auditors exchanged glances that she couldn't interpret. Michael Santos leaned forward slightly, his expression suggesting professional interest rather than polite attention.
"That was excellent," he said. "Your understanding of Baroque style is quite sophisticated. Where did you study before your current situation?" Sophia briefly explained her early training, mentioning her teachers and the youth symphony experience. She tried to keep the explanation factual rather than emotional, focusing on the musical education rather than the personal tragedy that had interrupted it. For the Chopin, she chose the first ballade, a piece that had always felt deeply personal to her. The Romantic era's emphasis on emotional expression allowed her to channel some of the pain and longing she had carried for the past 2 years. As she played, she felt tears forming in her eyes, but she didn't let them affect her technique or musical line. The piece built to its dramatic climax with power that surprised even Sophia. The concert grand responded to her touch with dynamic range and tonal complexity that made the music feel alive in the room. When she reached the final, quiet conclusion, the silence that followed felt profound. Harper was the first to speak. "That was extraordinary. The emotional maturity in your interpretation is remarkable, especially for someone your age." "Thank you," Sophia replied, though she wondered if her emotional maturity was really a function of age or of experiences that had forced her to grow up faster than most people her age. The contemporary piece by Higden was perhaps the most challenging, requiring techniques and stylistic approaches that were different from classical and romantic repertoire. But Sophia had always enjoyed learning new musical languages, and she navigated the complex rhythms and harmonic structures with confidence. When she finished all 3 pieces, the room was quiet for several moments. The 3 auditors conferred in whispers while Sophia sat at the piano, trying to read their expressions and failing completely. Finally, Marcus Williams addressed her directly. "Sophia, what we've heard today confirms everything I suspected from your street performance. You have conservatory-level abilities and musical instincts that are quite rare. We'd like to offer you a place in our Young Artist Development Program," Dr. Harper continued.
It's a year-long intensive program that includes private lessons with symphony musicians, masterclasses, chamber music coaching and performance opportunities. The program also includes a small stipend for living expenses, Michael Santos added. It's not much, but it should help you focus on your musical development without worrying constantly about basic survival. Sophia stared at them, trying to process what she was hearing. A year ago, she had been sleeping in doorways and wondering if her musical training would ever matter again. Now she was being offered an opportunity that could reshape her entire future. "What would I need to do?" she asked. Her voice barely above a whisper. "Show up, work hard, and be open to growing as a musician," Dr. Harper replied with a smile. "The program starts next month. We'll help you with housing arrangements and other practical matters. We should also discuss longer-term goals," Marcus added. "Depending on your progress this year, we can help you apply to conservatory programs for next fall. There are scholarships available for students with exceptional talent and compelling backgrounds." The phrase compelling backgrounds was clearly a euphemism for her homelessness, but Sophia didn't mind. If her circumstances could open doors that might otherwise remain closed, she was willing to accept that advantage. "There's one more thing," Michael Santos said. "We'd like you to perform with our chamber ensemble next month. It's a small concert mostly for donors and symphony supporters, but it would give you experience performing in a professional context again." Sophia felt overwhelmed by the generosity and faith these people were showing in her abilities. After 2 years of being ignored or dismissed by most of society, being valued and supported by professional musicians felt almost impossible to believe. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Dr. Harper replied gently. "Say you'll trust us to help you rebuild the musical career you deserve to have." As Sophia left the symphony offices that afternoon, she carried with her a folder full of program information, contact details for housing assistance, and a performance contract for the upcoming chamber concert. The practical details of transitioning from homelessness to student life would be complex, but for the first time in years she had institutional support to help navigate those challenges. The viral video had opened a door, but her own talent and determination had walked her through it. Standing on the sidewalk outside the symphony building, Sophia allowed herself to imagine a future that extended beyond survival, a future where her music could once again be the center of her life, rather than just a means of earning enough money for the next meal. That evening, she returned to the bus station one last time as a homeless street performer. The piano looked smaller and shabbier than she remembered, but it had served its purpose. It had kept her connected to her musical identity when everything else had been stripped away. It had provided a platform for the performance that changed her life. As she played her final pieces at the transit station, Sophia felt gratitude for the instrument that had sheltered her talent during the hardest period of her life. Tomorrow she would begin practicing on concert grands and preparing for chamber music performances. But tonight she honored the battered upright piano that had reminded the world and herself that talent and dignity could survive even in the most unlikely circumstances. The small crowd that gathered for her farewell performance included several familiar faces, commuters who had stopped to listen over the past months, other street musicians who had become acquaintances, even Patricia, who had heard through social media that this might be Sophia's last performance at the station. When she finished playing, the applause lasted longer than usual. People seemed to understand that they were witnessing the end of something unique, the conclusion of a chapter in a story that had touched their lives in small but meaningful ways. As Sophia packed up her few belongings and prepared to leave the bus station behind, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that Tuesday morning, when angry teenagers had tried to humiliate her into silence. Their cruelty had backfired spectacularly, forcing her to demonstrate the very talent they had mocked and setting in motion the series of events that would restore her future. The next phase of her journey would bring new challenges, adjusting to institutional life, meeting the expectations of professional mentors, navigating the complex world of classical music careers. But she would face those challenges with something she hadn't possessed in years: hope, support, and the certainty that her talent had value in the world. Walking away from the transit station for the last time, Sophia carried with her not just the practical tools for rebuilding her life, but the knowledge that music truly could be a language powerful enough to translate suffering into beauty, desperation into hope, and invisible people into artists worthy of recognition and support. Part 3. 6 months into the Young Artist Development Program, Sophia found herself standing backstage at Benaroya Hall, the same venue where she had performed her final concert before her parents' death. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was returning to the stage where her old life had ended, now beginning what felt like an entirely new existence. Tonight's performance was different from the small chamber concerts she had been giving as part of her program development. This was a full orchestral debut, performing Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1 with the Seattle Symphony's Second Ensemble. The audience would include major donors, music critics, and industry professionals who could shape her future career. Dr. Harper had prepared her thoroughly for this moment. 6 months of intensive training had restored and refined Sophia's technique beyond what she had achieved even in her youth. Working with Michael Santos had taught her subtleties of interpretation she hadn't understood as a teenager. The program's holistic approach had addressed not just her musical development, but the psychological recovery from trauma that had affected her relationship with performance. "You've grown tremendously," Dr. Harper had told her during their final coaching session. "Your musical maturity now matches your technical abilities. More importantly, you've learned to trust yourself again." The comment reflected something Sophia had only recently recognized about her own journey. The years of homelessness had damaged more than her living situation. They had eroded her confidence in her own perceptions and abilities. Being consistently dismissed or ignored by society had made her question whether her talent was real or simply a delusion born from desperation. Working with established professionals who valued her contributions had slowly rebuilt her sense of musical identity. When Michael Santos asked for her interpretation of a particular passage, when Dr. Harper incorporated her suggestions into rehearsal plans, when other program participants sought her advice about technical challenges, Sophia began to trust her instincts again. The chamber concerts had been crucial stepping stones. Small audiences of symphony supporters had allowed her to redevelop stage presence without the pressure of major public scrutiny. Each performance had built her confidence and demonstrated her growth to program administrators who were evaluating her readiness for larger opportunities. Tonight represented the culmination of that preparation. A successful performance could lead to management representation, competition opportunities, and the kind of career trajectory she had always dreamed about. A failure could set back her progress significantly, though Dr. Harper had been careful to emphasize that one performance wouldn't define her future. As Sophia warmed up in the practice room, she reflected on how different her preparation felt compared to her youth symphony days. Then she had approached performances with the confidence of someone who had never experienced significant failure or loss. Her parents had been in the audience, her future had seemed assured, and music had been pure joy rather than a lifeline to survival. Now she prepared with the knowledge of how quickly circumstances could change, how fragile the infrastructure of a musical career could be. But this awareness brought depth to her interpretation rather than anxiety. She understood viscerally what Chopin had been expressing about loss and longing, about finding beauty in the midst of struggle. The knock on her practice room door came precisely on schedule. Marcus Williams appeared with his characteristic calm professionalism. "How are you feeling?" he asked, though his experienced eye was already assessing her readiness. "Nervous," Sophia admitted. "But the good kind of nervous." Marcus smiled. That's exactly what I want to hear. The orchestra is excited to work with you tonight. Maestro Chen has been impressed with your rehearsals. Maestro Chen was a guest conductor from Vancouver who specialized in working with emerging soloists. His reputation for developing young talent was legendary, and his decision to feature Sophia in tonight's program carried significant weight in the classical music community. There's something else, Marcus continued. We've had several inquiries from management companies who have heard about tonight's performance. Nothing you need to think about now, but opportunities are developing. The information was encouraging but also overwhelming. Sophia had focused so intently on tonight's performance that she hadn't fully considered what success might bring. The idea of management representation, of building a professional career, felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. One step at a time, Marcus reminded her, reading her expression accurately. Tonight is about sharing your music with people who will appreciate it. Everything else can wait. As they walked toward the stage area, Sophia caught glimpses of the audience settling into their seats. Benaroya Hall's acoustic design meant that sound traveled both directions. She could hear the conversations and anticipation of the crowd that would soon be listening to her performance. In the wings, she encountered several orchestra members she had worked with during rehearsals. Their easy camaraderie reminded her that tonight wasn't just about her individual performance. She was part of a collaborative effort to create something beautiful together. Ready to show them what we've been working on? Asked Sarah, the principal violinist who had become something of a mentor during the program. Ready, Sophia replied, surprised to find that she meant it. Maestro Chen appeared for the traditional pre-performance gathering. His pre-concert talks had become legendary among orchestra members for their ability to focus nervous energy into musical expression. Tonight we tell a story, he said simply. Chopin's story, yes, but also our story as musicians who believe music can transform lives. Sophia, your journey embodies that transformation. Trust that and let it inform your playing. When her moment came, Sophia walked onto the stage with steady steps.
The applause was warm and encouraging, but she barely heard it. Her attention was focused on the piano, a magnificent Steinway that gleamed under the stage lights like a familiar friend. As she adjusted the bench and positioned herself at the keyboard, Sophia felt the peculiar calm that had always preceded her best performances. The audience, the critics, the potential career implications, all of that faded into background noise. What remained was the music itself, waiting to be brought to life. The opening orchestral introduction established the concerto's romantic grandeur. When her entrance arrived, Sophia's fingers found the keys with precision that felt both natural and inevitable. The first notes emerged with clarity and warmth that immediately established her command of both instrument and material. As the first movement developed, Sophia felt herself entering the flow state that distinguished truly memorable performances from merely competent ones. Her technical preparation became invisible, allowing emotional expression to drive musical choices. The orchestra responded to her leadership, creating the kind of collaborative music-making that made individual contributions blend into something larger. The second movement's lyrical beauty provided opportunity for the kind of intimate expression that had become Sophia's signature strength. Her phrasing conveyed vulnerability without sentimentality, depth without melodrama. In the audience, she could sense the quality of attention that indicated genuine engagement rather than polite listening. The final movement's technical demands showcased the restoration of her virtuosic abilities. Passages that had challenged her as a teenager now felt comfortably within her capabilities. More importantly, her interpretation integrated technical display with musical content, avoiding the empty showmanship that sometimes characterized young performers. When the final notes faded and she lifted her hands from the keyboard, the silence that followed felt profound. Then applause erupted with an enthusiasm that clearly went beyond polite appreciation.
The audience rose to their feet, and several orchestra members smiled at her with obvious pleasure at the performance they had just shared. Maestro Chen's handshake was firm, and his smile genuine. "Magnificent," he said simply, which from his reputation was high praise indeed. The post-concert reception provided opportunity for networking that would have intimidated Sophia a year earlier. Now, equipped with confidence earned through months of professional development, she navigated conversations with donors, critics, and industry professionals with appropriate poise. "That was extraordinary," said Rebecca Torres, a music critic whose reviews could significantly impact a young performer's career trajectory. "Your interpretation showed remarkable maturity. I'll be very interested to follow your development." Several management representatives approached with business cards and requests for future meetings. Dr. Harper stayed nearby, helping Sophia understand which opportunities were worth pursuing and which might be premature for her current career stage. "This is exactly the response we hoped for," she told Sophia during a quiet moment. "You've demonstrated that you're ready for the next level of professional development." As the evening wound down, Sophia found herself in conversation with a representative from the Van Cliburn International Piano Competition. The competition was considered one of the most prestigious events in the piano world, launching careers that often led to major international recognition. "We'd like to invite you to compete next year," the representative explained. "Your playing tonight suggests you'd be very competitive at that level." The invitation represented validation that Sophia's career was progressing at an exceptional pace. Most pianists spent years building credits before earning invitations to competitions of that caliber, but perhaps the most meaningful moment came when she spotted familiar faces in the post-concert crowd. Patricia, who had offered practice time during Sophia's transition period, approached with obvious emotion. "I've never been so proud of someone I barely know," she said with tears in her eyes. "Watching you tonight, seeing how far you've come, it's incredible." Behind her stood Jake, the teenager who had first recorded Sophia's street performance. His presence tonight completed a circle that felt symbolically important. "I've been following your progress online," he said. "A lot of people who saw that first video have been cheering for you. Tonight proves they were right to believe in you." Even more surprising was the appearance of the group of teenagers who had originally mocked her at the bus station. Brandon, who had led their cruel commentary, approached with obvious nervousness. "We saw the announcement about tonight's performance," he said carefully. "We wanted to come and apologize again, and to hear you play in a proper setting." The gesture was unnecessary, but appreciated. Sophia recognized that their presence represented something important about accountability and growth. Their initial cruelty had inadvertently triggered the sequence of events that led to her current success, but their willingness to acknowledge their mistakes and support her achievement showed genuine character development. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "I hope you enjoyed the performance." As the reception concluded and Sophia prepared to leave Benaroya Hall, she paused in the lobby to look back at the venue that had witnessed both the end of her childhood dreams and their resurrection in more mature form. The journey from street performer to professional concert debut had taken only 8 months, but the personal growth represented years of compressed development. She had learned to trust her abilities again, to navigate professional relationships, to handle public attention with appropriate boundaries. Most importantly, she had discovered that her earlier dreams of musical success had been too narrow. The career she was building now involved not just personal achievement, but using her platform to advocate for others who faced systemic barriers to developing their talents. Dr. Harper had already discussed plans for Sophia to serve as a mentor in future young artist development programs. The idea of helping other talented individuals overcome circumstances similar to her own felt like a natural extension of her artistic mission. Over the following weeks, reviews of her performance appeared in major publications with consistently positive assessments, Her recording of the Chopin concerto, made during the live performance, was being considered for commercial release. Management contracts were negotiated with careful attention to maintaining artistic control while building professional opportunities. The Van Cliburn competition became a focus for the next phase of her development. Competition preparation required a different kind of discipline than concert performance, with demands for technical perfection and interpretive consistency that would push her abilities to new levels. But success also brought unexpected challenges. Media attention sometimes focused more on her dramatic backstory than her musical accomplishments. Interview requests often emphasized the homelessness narrative rather than her artistic development. Learning to control her public image while remaining authentic about her experiences required skills that hadn't been part of her musical training. Your story is part of your identity as an artist, Marcus explained during one of their regular check-ins, but you get to decide how much of it you share, and in what context. The music should always be the primary focus. 6 months after her Benaroya Hall debut, Sophia found herself preparing for the Van Cliburn competition preliminary rounds. Her apartment, a modest but comfortable space near the University of Washington, contained the upright piano she had purchased with her first significant performance fees. The instrument was far from the concert grands she now regularly performed on, but it represented something important about her journey. She had gone from playing a battered public piano for spare change to owning her own instrument and choosing how to use her musical gifts. Competition preparation consumed her days with technical work, interpretation refinement, and mental preparation for the pressures of international competition. But she also maintained regular performance commitments that kept her connected to audiences and continued building her professional reputation. The chamber music series she had joined provided ongoing collaboration with established musicians who challenged her to grow as an ensemble player. Solo recitals in smaller venues allowed her to explore repertoire that might not be appropriate for large orchestral settings. Teaching students through the symphony's educational programs connected her to the next generation of musicians. On quiet evenings, Sophia sometimes returned to the bus station where her viral moment had occurred. The public piano was still there, though it showed increasing wear from weather and heavy use. Occasionally she would sit and play a few pieces, partly for nostalgia and partly to remind herself of how far she had traveled. These visits often drew small crowds of commuters who recognized her from her continued media presence. But the dynamic was entirely different now. Instead of playing for survival, she was sharing music from a position of security and choice. The difference felt profound. During one such visit, she encountered a young man who appeared to be experiencing homelessness. He listened to her playing with obvious musical knowledge, and when she paused, he asked if he could try the piano. His performance revealed training similar to what hers had been, classical technique undermined by circumstances that had interrupted his development. They talked briefly about his situation, and Sophia found herself offering information about social services and educational programs that might help him. The conversation reminded her that her own rescue had required both individual talent and extraordinary circumstances: the viral video, the visibility it created, the institutional support that followed. For every success story like hers, there were probably dozens of talented individuals whose gifts remained unrecognized due to systemic barriers. This awareness became part of her artistic mission. Success, she realized, carried obligations to use her platform for purposes larger than personal achievement. The Young Artist Development Program that had rescued her needed advocates and funding to help others. Arts education programs in schools required support to identify and nurture talent regardless of students' economic backgrounds. As her career continued developing, Sophia made commitments to perform benefit concerts for organizations supporting homeless youth. She spoke at conferences about the relationship between arts access and social equity. Her growing influence allowed her to amplify causes that might otherwise lack visibility in classical music circles. The Van Cliburn competition represented the next major milestone in her professional development. Success there could launch her toward the kind of international career that had been her parents' dream for her. But failure wouldn't devastate her the way it might have earlier in her journey. She had learned that talent could survive almost any circumstances if it remained connected to purpose larger than personal ambition. Music had saved her from despair during her darkest period, and now it provided a means of creating positive change for others facing similar challenges. Standing at her apartment window on the evening before leaving for the competition, Sophia reflected on the transformation her life had undergone. 2 years earlier she had been sleeping in doorways and wondering if anyone would ever value her gifts again. Now she was preparing to compete on one of classical music's most prestigious stages. The journey from homelessness to professional success had required rebuilding not just her circumstances, but her sense of identity and purpose. The girl who had played for spare change had become an artist whose work carried meaning beyond personal expression. Tomorrow she would travel to Fort Worth to begin the Van Cliburn competition. Whatever the outcome, she carried with her the knowledge that music truly could transform lives, not just through the beauty it created, but through the connections it fostered between people who might otherwise remain invisible to each other. Her fingers found the keys of her upright piano one final time before the competition, playing the simple melody that had sustained her through the hardest period of her life. The notes rang out clear and true, carrying with them all the hope and determination that had brought her to this moment. The music continued, just as it always had, just as it always would. The morning sun cast long shadows across the practice rooms at the Van Cliburn competition headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas. Sophia had arrived 3 days early to acclimate herself to the environment where her professional future would be determined. The Cliburn represented more than just another competition. It was the gateway to the kind of international career that could establish her as a major artist rather than simply a talented performer with an inspiring backstory. Her practice room was Spartan but functional, containing a Steinway Model D that had been voiced specifically for competition use. The instrument responded with the kind of precision and clarity that made even routine technical exercises feel like musical statements. After months of preparation, Sophia's repertoire had been refined to a level that satisfied even her perfectionist tendencies. The competition format required 3 rounds of increasingly challenging performances. The preliminary round would feature a 30-minute solo recital, showcasing range and musical maturity. Survivors would advance to the semi-final round, performing a full recital program with chamber music components. The final round consisted of a complete piano concerto with the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra, broadcast internationally and attended by industry professionals who could shape winners' careers for decades. Sophia's preliminary program balanced technical display with interpretive depth. She had chosen Bach's Partita No. 2 for its contrapuntal complexity, Beethoven's Sonata Op. 111 for its philosophical profundity, and Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit for its impressionistic color and virtuosic demands. Each piece represented a different aspect of piano literature, demonstrating her versatility while playing to her particular strengths. The Bach Partita had become something of a signature piece for Sophia. Her understanding of Baroque style, developed through years of careful study with Michael Santos, allowed her to bring clarity and elegance to music that could easily become academic or mechanical. Her interpretation emphasized the dance rhythms that underpinned Bach's writing, creating performances that felt both historically informed and vibrantly alive. Beethoven's final sonata presented different challenges.
The work's 2 movements traced a journey from struggle to transcendence that resonated deeply with Sophia's own life experience.
Her interpretation avoided the trap of over-personalizing the music, while still allowing her understanding of profound loss and recovery to inform her musical choices. The result was playing that combined technical mastery with genuine emotional depth. Ravel's Gaspard represented the most purely virtuosic element of her program. The work's three movements demanded different types of technical brilliance. The water imagery of Ondine required fluid legato and crystalline clarity. Le Gibbet needed atmospheric color and sustained tension, while Scarbo called for explosive power and rhythmic precision. Sophia's months of preparation had brought each movement to a level where technical challenges became invisible, allowing the music's fantastic imagery to emerge clearly. Between practice sessions, Sophia explored Fort Worth's cultural district and tried to manage the nervous energy that always preceded major performances. The city's combination of Western heritage and sophisticated arts infrastructure created an atmosphere that felt both relaxed and serious about musical excellence. Other competitors were visible throughout the area, their focused intensity creating an environment of mutual respect and friendly competition. Dr. Harper had accompanied Sophia to provide support and perspective during the competition week. Her presence offered continuity with the development program that had prepared Sophia for this moment, but also practical guidance about managing competition pressure and media attention. "Remember that you've already won," Dr. Harper reminded her during one of their daily conversations. "Everything that brought you here, the program, the performances, the career development, those are permanent achievements regardless of what happens this week." The perspective was helpful but didn't entirely eliminate the stakes Sophia felt around the competition. Success here could accelerate her career development by years, providing international exposure and management opportunities that might otherwise take decades to achieve. More importantly, it would validate her belief that talent could overcome any circumstances with sufficient determination and support. The competition's opening ceremony brought together 48 pianists from 23 countries, representing the most promising young artists in the classical music world. Looking around the room, Sophia recognized several performers whose videos she had studied during her preparation. The level of talent was extraordinary, making advancement beyond the preliminary round genuinely uncertain. Media interviews had become part of the competition experience, with journalists seeking stories that would humanize the event for general audiences. Sophia had learned to handle these conversations professionally, focusing on her musical development while acknowledging her background without allowing it to overshadow her artistic accomplishments. "Your story is inspiring," said a reporter from Classical Music America, "but tonight's performance will be judged purely on musical merit. How do you feel about that?" "That's exactly how it should be," Sophia replied. "Music has to stand on its own. My background gives me certain perspectives as an artist, but the performance has to communicate something meaningful regardless of what people know about my life." The preliminary round performances were scheduled over 3 days, with 16 pianists performing each day. Sophia was assigned to the second day, giving her an opportunity to attend other performances and gauge the competition level. The standard was exceptionally high, with each performer demonstrating the kind of technical security and musical maturity that represented years of intensive preparation. Several performances particularly impressed her. A pianist from South Korea brought extraordinary clarity and power to a program featuring Chopin and Liszt. A competitor from Germany demonstrated remarkable sensitivity in French Impressionist repertoire. A young American performer showed exceptional interpretive insight in a program of contemporary works. Watching these performances reminded Sophia that advancing in the competition would require not just excellent playing, but playing that stood out from an extremely talented field. Her program would need to demonstrate qualities that distinguished her artistic voice from those of her equally accomplished competitors. The night before her preliminary performance, Sophia followed her established pre-concert routine. A light dinner was followed by gentle practice focused on mental preparation rather than technical drilling. She reviewed scores mentally, visualizing her performances in detail. Early sleep was essential for maintaining the physical and mental alertness that high-level performance demanded. Competition day began with a brief warm-up session in her assigned practice room. The Steinway felt familiar after 3 days of preparation, responding to her touch with the reliability she had come to expect from quality instruments. Her hands felt secure and her mind clear, the ideal state for important performances. The competition hall was more intimate than many venues where Sophia had recently performed, seating approximately 600 people. The audience consisted primarily of other competitors, industry professionals and serious music lovers who attended the Clyburn regularly. Their attention would be focused and knowledgeable, creating an environment where musical details would be clearly heard and evaluated. Backstage, Sophia encountered other performers from her competition day. The atmosphere was supportive rather than cutthroat, with musicians offering encouragement and sharing the nervous energy that preceded important performances. Several competitors had been following each other's careers through social media and recordings, creating a sense of community among artists facing similar challenges. When her time came, Sophia walked onto the stage with confidence born from months of thorough preparation. The applause was warm but measured. This audience understood that real appreciation would be reserved for after the performance. She adjusted the bench carefully and positioned herself at the keyboard, taking a moment to center herself before beginning. The opening of Bach's partita emerged with clarity and elegance that immediately established her command of the material. Her interpretation brought out the dance rhythms underlying Bach's contrapuntal writing, creating music that felt both historically informed and vibrantly alive. The technical challenges of the work were handled with apparent ease, allowing musical content to drive the performance. As she moved through the partita's 6 movements, Sophia felt the special focus that characterized her best performances. The audience, the competition stakes, the career implications, all of that receded into background awareness. What remained was the music itself and her commitment to communicating its beauty and complexity as clearly as possible. The transition to Beethoven required a complete shift in style and emotional approach. Where Bach demanded clarity and proportion, Beethoven's final sonata called for music that could contain philosophical depth and emotional extremes. Sophia's interpretation traced the work's journey from struggle to transcendence without sentimentalizing either the conflict or the resolution. The first movement's dramatic contrasts were handled with maturity that avoided excessive display, while still conveying the music's inherent power. The second movement's variations built logically toward the transcendent conclusion, with each variation contributing to an overall architectural plan. When she reached the final pages, Sophia felt she had successfully communicated the spiritual dimension that made this sonata one of Beethoven's most profound statements. Ravel's Gaspard provided an opportunity to display the virtuosic elements of her technique while demonstrating her sensitivity to impressionistic color and atmosphere. Ondine flowed with liquid grace that made the technical challenges invisible. Lo Gibe created genuine atmosphere of suspended tension. Scarbo exploded with the kind of controlled wildness that the music demanded. When the final notes of Scarbo died away, the silence that followed felt charged with the energy of exceptional music making. Then applause erupted with an enthusiasm that clearly went beyond polite appreciation. Several competitors in the audience exchanged glances that suggested recognition of a particularly successful performance. Sophia acknowledged the applause with appropriate grace before leaving the stage. Backstage, she felt the mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration that followed demanding performances. Dr. Harper was waiting with water and the kind of practical support that helped manage post-performance adrenaline. "That was extraordinary," Dr. Harper said simply. "You played with complete musical conviction. Whatever happens in the judging, you communicated everything you intended to communicate." Results from the preliminary round would be announced the following evening, giving competitors time to either prepare for semi-final performances or process elimination from the competition. Sophia spent the intervening day trying to maintain normal routines while managing the nervous energy that accompanied waiting for important news. The announcement ceremony was held in the competition hall, with all 48 participants gathered to learn their fates. The process was formal but not unnecessarily dramatic. 12 pianists would advance to the semi-final round, continuing their pursuit of the competition's top prizes. When Sophia's name was called among the 12 semi-finalists, relief and excitement competed for dominance in her emotional response. She had successfully navigated the first hurdle and earned the right to continue competing at the highest level of the piano world. The semi-final round required a complete evening-length recital, approximately 90 minutes of music that would demonstrate the depth and breadth of each competitor's artistry. Program selection became crucial. The music needed to showcase individual strengths while satisfying the diverse tastes of competition judges. Sophia's semi-final program reflected careful consideration of both her artistic identity and strategic competition needs. She opened with Bach's Goldberg Variations, a work that allowed her to display contrapuntal understanding and structural awareness. The central portion featured Schumann's Carnaval, showcasing her facility with romantic character pieces and her ability to create convincing musical personalities. She concluded with Prokofiev's Sonata No. 7, demonstrating her command of 20th-century repertoire and its particular technical demands. The program represented approximately 2 hours of music, requiring not just technical security, but the kind of stamina and concentration that separated professional-level performers from talented amateurs. Each work needed to maintain its individual character, while contributing to an overall musical journey that would sustain audience interest throughout the evening. Preparation for the semi-final intensified the pressure Sophia felt around the competition. Only 6 finalists would advance to perform concertos with orchestra, meaning that half of the current field would be eliminated after the semi-final round. The margin for error was essentially zero. Every musical detail would be scrutinized by judges who understood the repertoire intimately. But the increased pressure also brought greater clarity about what Sophia hoped to achieve through competition participation. Beyond the practical career benefits, she wanted to demonstrate that artistic excellence could emerge from any circumstances with sufficient dedication and support. Her presence in the semi-finals represented validation not just of her individual talent, but of the programs and people who had invested in her development. The semi-final performances were scheduled over 2 evenings, with 6 recitals each night. Sophia was assigned to the second evening, giving her the opportunity to hear other semi-finalists and adjust her own preparation accordingly. The level of playing was even higher than in the preliminary round, with each performer demonstrating the kind of musical maturity and technical security that characterized potential prize winners. Competition day arrived with the familiar mixture of nervous anticipation and focused determination that preceded important performances. Sophia's warm-up session felt secure and musical, suggesting that her preparation had achieved the level of reliability necessary for high-stakes performance. The evening began with 3 other recitals, each showcasing different approaches to program building and musical communication. A competitor from Japan demonstrated extraordinary technical refinement in a program featuring Chopin and Debussy. A pianist from Russia brought powerful interpretive insights to works by Rachmaninoff and Scriabin. An American performer showed remarkable versatility in a program spanning 3 centuries of piano literature. When Sophia's turn came, she felt the heightened attention that characterized final competition rounds. The audience included not just other competitors and music lovers, but industry professionals whose opinions could significantly impact her future career opportunities. Media representatives were present to document performances that might launch international careers. Walking onto the stage, Sophia felt complete confidence in her preparation and her musical intentions. The 2 weeks of intensive competition environment had refined her performance instincts and strengthened her ability to communicate under pressure. She was ready to share music that represented her artistic identity at its current best. The Goldberg variations opened with the kind of clarity and elegance that had become Sophia's signature in Baroque repertoire. Her interpretation emphasized the architectural aspects of Bach's design, while bringing out the dance rhythms and melodic beauty that made the music emotionally engaging. Each variation contributed to an overall structure that built logically toward the concluding return of the opening aria. Schumann's Carnaval provided opportunities for the kind of character creation and romantic expression that showcased different aspects of Sophia's musical personality. Each miniature movement became a distinct musical portrait, with Eusebius displaying lyrical sensitivity, Florestan showing dramatic power, and Chopin demonstrating her understanding of different compositional styles. The work's technical challenges were handled with apparent ease, allowing the music's programmatic content to emerge clearly. Prokofiev's Seventh Sonata concluded the program with displays of rhythmic precision and percussive power that proved Sophia's command of 20th-century piano literature. The work's 3 movements required different types of virtuosity: motoric energy in the first movement, atmospheric color in the second, and explosive brilliance in the finale. Her interpretation brought out the work's underlying lyricism while meeting its considerable technical demands. When the final notes echoed through the hall, the audience response was immediate and enthusiastic. Sophia acknowledged the applause with genuine gratitude before leaving the stage, feeling that she had successfully communicated the musical ideas that had guided her preparation. The next morning brought news that would shape the next phase of her career. She had been selected as one of 6 finalists who would perform concertos with the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra. The achievement represented validation at the highest level of piano competition, regardless of final rankings. More importantly, reaching the finals meant that her story of recovery and artistic growth had achieved its ultimate validation. From homeless street performer to Claiborne finalist represented a journey that demonstrated the transformative power of music and the importance of supporting artistic talent regardless of circumstance. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.